Okay,
Okay.
so just so you know, I'm recording audio as well.
Okay. Very good. Oh, so maybe you could send the audio to Otter.
I could, yes.
Okay. So this is my interview with Sam. That's going to get edited for his profile that we're doing. God. So Sam, I'm really glad that I'm interviewing you, even though I feel like if I don't know you and I just thought a little bit about how I would feel about something, I might come pretty close to how you would feel. But I'm going to
Well,
let you.
thanks for wanting to do this. And I actually don't know what this is going to be, so I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. So I was trying to think of the kind of questions that really help somebody to know each other. And I guess what's important to me is I'd like to know what you think is the most important value and how that how you feel regarding yourself and that value and how you feel regarding others and the world or
Okay. So to me, the value I'm about to describe is not quite so personal. It's actually, I would like to think, in a grander context. So I think of it in terms of what has happened throughout history. Throughout history, we've had a species of apes called Homo sapiens come about in the last 200,000 years or whatever, and they create cultures, they create civilizations that come and go. And they go when they're challenged by the complexities that they cannot handle, whether it's food for everybody or whether it's, any other kind of resource or whether it's, bickering among themselves, So the fact that civilizations come and go is a cycle that seems to repeat itself. However, we're now in a part of the cycle where we believe that we have certain capabilities that the previous did not. Now, we may be wrong about that, okay? Certainly there are structures on Earth that we don't know yet how to build, and they exist. But we believe we have electricity, we believe we have all kinds of power sources and generation and distribution. We have the internet, a way of distributing information. All that says to me is that civilizations achieve to their apex, and if they're not able to go beyond that, then they disappear. So we are right now at a crossroads where we have some challenges ahead of us, and either we solve those challenges, overcome those, or we are going to disappear. So if we look at that direction and that sense of time as the universe is giving life forms an opportunity to develop social structures, coexistence structures that allow them to scale beyond their decimation. So what that means to me is we got to figure out how to live together because the universe is giving us an opportunity to do that. And if we fail that challenge, if we fail that privilege, we're going to go by, and then eons later, another civilization is going to come by and have their chance.
where do
So
you
all of
see,
that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know we're on a time constraint, but where do you see the role of leadership fitting into that?
Well, I haven't actually answered the question of value yet.
Okay.
So to me, I'm kind of getting there.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry.
So if I'm looking at what this direction means, okay, I'm grounding this discussion, not just saying, oh, I personally believe X, Y, Z, and then let's, move forward. I'm saying that if we take this look and we actually look at what's necessary for us, then we have to figure out how to persist, how to use the resources that we have, how to not waste them, how not to waste our energies, our coexistence. So to me, it's how do we get along together, which in a single word is the coexistence word. So to me, even though it's not as grand and as lofty as universal love or universal peace or universal bliss or universal enlightenment, all of those cannot happen unless we get to coexistence first. So to me, this really crucial step of coexistence is necessary before we achieve all of those other lofty goals. I think it's not a nice vision for 5 of us to say, we'll kill all the other 8 billion, but the rest of us are going to be in joy and peace and bliss and enlightenment and all of that, loving thing. That to me doesn't seem to make sense. That doesn't hold water. Although I certainly give way to the possibility that certain people might think that way. Okay. Anyway, sorry to go on so long about your first question,
The
but
value.
that's why I answer it that way. Okay. I think this notion of value is to be grounded and it's not abstract.
So, okay, I never think of, so when I think of values, I guess I never think of that as being one of the choices. I think of kindness, intelligence, courage. Do you have one of the standard values you could give me?
There are many people more wise than I, and one of the wisest is the Dalai Lama. So I like his emphasis on compassion. So to me, compassion is in my statement of what my life purpose is.
So when you're dealing with people in whatever situation, is their measure of compassion what you most, is that like, does that weigh the heaviest when you're judging people in your personal and your work life? Is that the one value that sticks out most that you hone in on and make your first judgment about?
I wouldn't say that's the way I approach the value. I approach it by saying, I think what I would like to see is all of us develop more compassion. Not to make any judgment about where people are in their state of compassion, but just that all of us should develop more of it. And I think that would allow us to coexist more
Okay.
better.
My next question. What personally has been the greatest challenge that you've ever had to face, and how did you navigate those waters?
If I have to pick only one,
Or you could pick the one that's most relevant to you as you go forward at this moment in time.
yeah, I think that recently I am even more aware of my limitations to be compassionate, to be kind. And I think it just hit me in the face this morning. Someone actually had a quote, one of these memes on the internet that I probably pay too much attention to, is empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. And that got me to thinking that yes, one could be empathetic, one could be compassionate, but if one is all that and not yet working on my own integrity, working my own resilience, my own thrivability, then yes, that does come to a self-destructive kind of behavior. And I never saw it put it that succinctly before, but I think it's quite on the mark. So yes, I'm trying to figure out how to be compassionate, how to be kind, and yet at the same time, not let that to my own suffering or my own demise or my own self-destructive behavior.
So I'm going to put you on the spot now because I think you're up for the challenge. And I'm going to ask you to tell me what you think your greatest skill set is that you do bring to the table.
Okay, so to many, or to some, because I've heard this criticism, this comes across as a weakness. But to me, it's a thoroughness of examining from first principles what is valid, what is relevant, what is true. So for example, the conversations we've been having in GCC seem to be going nowhere, according to certain critics, because they haven't produced a barn, they haven't produced an airport, they haven't produced a global governance model. But to me, examination of what it takes to create a society that is not hierarchical, that is not power-based, that is more coexistent from an autonomous entities standpoint, requires that we look at certain ways that we interact with each other. So what does an agreement mean? What does affirmation mean? What does truth mean? Um, are agreements to be changed? Are they unilaterally changeable? Are they bilaterally changeable? Are they changeable based on circumstance? Because I think if we're really going to coexist as really significant meaning creating entities without being subservient to power structures, we need to answer those questions for ourselves. And I'm very interested in these questions because I think if we get those patterns correct, then they can scale and they can really just, really make an impact on the world. It's like the DNA we want to seed the world with. How do we think about interaction with each other? First, start with yourself, then start with one other. What are those agreements you want to make with yourself? What are those ways you want to hold yourself accountable? Then, what does it makes, in what way does it make sense to ask those questions with one other person? And then you can sort of scale that. But all of this stuff about global governance models where we have governments that impose constitutions and legal codes and statutes and penalties and enforcement, they are trying to deal with the fact that not all of us are compassionate and kind to each other. So I think, to me, if there's more compassion, more kindness, more consideration for others, 80 to 90% of the legal structure could basically be eliminated if we take that sort of accountability to ourselves. There's still going to be some that are necessary. There's still some agreements that are external to us that are necessary. Things like, do you drive on the right side of the road or left side of the road? We do have to agree on that. Otherwise, chaos will ensue. But they're not things that have to do fundamentally with, uh, deep notions of right or wrong. They're just conventions and agreements that have to be made. Just like how much is 1 kilogram? Do we drive on this side? And what does red, yellow, green mean? Those are conventions that allow us and empower us to do things without negating life or, autonomy for anyone. So certain agreements still have to be made, but much of the legal code right now has to do with the fact that we're not all, considerate towards each other. I might be too naive, but I do think that this is our opportunity to evolve as individuals and as a civilization. Because if we don't do that, I think, we're just going to be sniping at each other, and that's going to waste all of our time, all of our resources without worrying about the global challenges that we have ahead of us, whether it's climate change or deforestation or food distribution or meteors or, whatever else.
I kind of let you off the hook because I didn't make you answer what that personal challenge was that you had faced. I'm going to go back to that.
I was talking about, finding my boundaries. How do I get across this boundary where I know I have a limit to the amount of compassion I can show, that I can actually exhibit, and I can actually enact? I think I was trying to say that. Maybe that didn't come across very clearly.
So what do
But
you
the
do?
challenge is,
What do you do when you reach that point?
I have to recover, then perhaps apologize, and then decide, do I want to be more compassionate or do I want to withdraw and figure out that I cannot be more compassionate? And every time I reach that limit and I lose myself or I lose control of myself, after I recover, I try to then go there and go beyond again and see if I'm capable of doing that.
And I just have to say, I know this is your interview, but I just have to say that that's one of the things that I really admire and respect about you, that you put yourself through the same rigorous tests and thought processes as you do any other subject, which I think is as it should be. And I happen to agree with you. I think people are answering questions without defining what the questions are. And I think that's part of the challenge that we face. What would you say is the greatest challenge that, well, you kind of answered this already, but I guess I'll give you another chance to just make it more succinct. If you could say what the the biggest challenge that you're focused on right now towards the world that you'd like to contribute to? Helping, not contribute to.
Well, okay, so the one that is huge and the one that I am engaged in right now with you and with others for the last 2 years is, does it make sense to think about new global governance models based on some of the things that have been mentioned in this discussion? In other words, can we think of a way that we individuals can be and can show up and can prepare ourselves so that we can have social agreements that are not penalty based, that are not enforcement based, that are vision motivated, that are community motivated, that are thrivability motivated, so that we can all be more proactive and say, if there's some notion of what goodness means, and we don't all completely share it, but it's all generally in that right direction, a similar direction, then we can align ourselves with it and be proactive with what we're actually doing. And in those cases where we see, let's say, unintended consequences that are negative, good, well-intentioned people can work that out. Okay, it doesn't need a third party, strong arm, army or police or government to come in and say, do the right thing. If we are ourselves, in a sense, mature and evolved enough to say, okay, yes, we understand the differences are natural. Let's figure this out. Let's, do something that's different from what each of us individually thought was right, but aligns ourselves, after some reasonable discussion to a mutually agreed result. I think that's something that we should be able to do more frequently. Right now, the slightest little thing, we go running off to courts or we go running off to third parties or arbitrators or whatever, because we don't trust each other to really engage one-on-one and really trust that we're each well-meaning and that we're reasonable people and we can actually reach some accord. And I think that is a breakdown of humanity, and I think that's what we need to get to. And I think that, to me, is a foundation for a new form of global governance, new society.
Has there been anything that's really surprised you, that's really changed the way you thought on a fundamental level in these past few years dealing with GCC and other such groups?
Yes, I am surprised that so many very smart, so many well-intentioned people still have so much difficulty actually creating collaboration. And those issues about why are the things that I'm curious about. And that field of study is what I call collaborology, and I welcome mutual interest in that, because those are interesting questions to me. Because if we can answer, really understand those issues, why, smart people can say, let's collaborate, but what they really mean is come work on my project. Or let's collaborate, but I'm not really interested enough to really know what you think.
Well, that, I mean, that is definitely the subject that I am most interested in.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of that myself, but I try to catch myself in those moments, and I try to step back and be a little bit more generous and really listen more carefully. And to some extent, don't get a chance then to talk about the things that I've been thinking about. But that's as it should be. I think those should come out in time. But without exhibiting that patience, I'd be guilty of the same thing. And I probably still am.
Well, I've heard you speak before about what you do to keep yourself accountable. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So, for a couple of years, starting probably 2012, I engaged in some conversations with Frode Hegland. Actually, it started with David Price and then Dino Karabeg. And then after a while, it included Alexander Laszlo and Frode Hegland. But the ideas were, if we really want to do something to help the world, what can we do? What is the difference that makes a difference? And not surprisingly, my conclusion, not entirely 100% shared by everyone else, is that we make the most difference when we work on what it is that's holding ourselves back. What is it that's internal that we are struggling with? And so being able to really get comfortable with that, get, some people call it, sorry, my dogs are getting noisy, about working through shadow, if you want to use the Jungian terms, to really understand self in wholeness, and then bring that as the individual towards a collaboration. So to me, the more we actually understand the way we work as individuals and what truth means and what accountability means and what good means and what learning means and trusting advisors to bring that mirror to your execution and say, is this really in alignment with your values or your objectives? And kind of do that on a regular basis and really learn from that so that my sense of good will naturally change, maybe subtly, but importantly over time as more and more of these discussions, these learning cycles, what I call these retrospectives or with peers, peer perspectives, will really shed light on what good really means. So good to me 5 years ago is not necessarily what good means to me now, because I keep asking these questions and people keep showing me what I do, and I say, well, okay, so I want to change that sense of good to this new sense of good. And so I'm looking for people who would value this practice as a personal practice, who will help me do it, because again, you can't do this in your own head, you know? We're already too much in our own heads. We need other people outside of our heads to help us do this. And if we have people that can accept these practices, then I want to look for other people who will also accept these practices, because then they will have that sense of accountability, that personal sense of accountability to good, that personal sense of learning and growth. And those are the people I want to connect with. Those are the people I feel I can be, co-creating with. And that's what I'm calling, just as a working name, the community of impact. And that's what I would like to see grow. Because I think that if we get anywhere from 3,000 to 30,000 such people, amplifying each other's efforts, resonating with each other, co-creating projects together, I think that's enough to really turn the planet. And so that's the scale at which I'm thinking will have planetary impact.
Well, I hope you're counting me in as one of those 3,000 because you're speaking my language.
Let's do it, sister.
um, so I'm going to try to keep this short. So if you were to leave this earth and you could leave a message behind, a message of advice, what would you really like to hope, what would be the message that you'd really want to leave with people?
You have a privilege. The privilege is that you're standing on the apex of this huge civilization that's, the universe has spent 13 or 14 billion years creating. Act like it. Do the responsible thing. Don't quibble among yourselves and, watch yourselves go out of existence. There's a real opportunity to, step beyond that and to really achieve. See, we are now participants in our own evolution. Up till now, it was either chance, or it was biology, or it was chemistry, or it was culture, or it was, the geography that determined where people go and what kind of social structures get created. At this point in our civilization, because of these things inside our crania, we have technologies. We can understand gene structures, we can understand information encodings, we can understand biological mechanisms. Sorry, my
I'm reminding you, take your
medicine.
What I'm saying is we have a chance now to create the next stage of human existence that's not left to chance, that's not left to chemistry, that's not left to biology. It's left to us and what we want to do with either the technologies we have, or we can weaponize them and then blow ourselves and kill ourselves off. But we can actually use those to evolve to a next stage. And that's a privilege as well as a responsibility. It's a privilege because I don't think any other civilization in the past has been to this stage with our understanding of either psychology or technology. Understanding of psychology is way less and much less than our understanding of technology. But until we get there, until we understand how this thing works and how to minimize fear and how to get the frontal cortex, to act rationally in service to human beingness, or, compassion-centered visioning, then it's going to be fear-based. It's going to be driven by fear, which means let's create weapons, let's create all kinds of ways to eliminate my threats. But if we can put those fears aside and use these things to create connection, thrivability, systemic structures that make sense, that understand flow, that understand the conservation of mass, energy, information, etc. Not information, sorry. Then we have a chance to evolve to a stage where biology would never take us, chemistry would never take us, chance would never take us. We have a chance to create that next stage of evolution. And oh, by the way, if we do that well, then we also will be able to spread that beyond the earth. But if we don't do that well, we're just a cancer on the earth, and the earth will be fine, but we will be gone. And then there'll be another civilization.
So if there is one thing that you would most want to role model, what would that one thing be?
A patience with the coevolution of human systems and tool systems. See, if we're not patient about that, then the technology will be developed for profit or for power, and without proper guidance from our values, our compassion, our coexistence, visions, that technology will create extremes and conditions that we won't be able to recover from. So as we develop technology, we need to co-evolve the human-centered sense of what it means for us to be responsible with that technology. Which means, the quickness of evolution for technology's sake is not the primal directive. It's not the prime directive. The considered responsible evolution of that, I think, is what we need to evolve towards.
Well, thank you, because I really do think you are role modeling that. And I think that is very much needed. And I do think you take flack for it. And
well,
so
I appreciate your feedback on this. I appreciate the questions and the opportunity, Stacy. And I appreciate a chance to put these into a form where I actually haven't said these words in this particular way before. Obviously, I've thought pieces of them before, but in this way, they've never actually been expressed. So I really appreciate the opportunity to do this.
thank you. It's a learning process. It's a little nerve-wracking being in this seat as well. So
Thank you.
would you like to end it now, or do you want the quick fun questions? It's up to you.
What are the quick fun questions? I don't know what they are.
I was good. Well, they're coming off the top of my head. So, for example, I would like to know which is the fictional character that you most relate to, and why?
Harry Seldon.
Who is that?
Do you know who Harry Seldon is?
No.
Isaac Asimov wrote a series of books. Many of you watching this video will recognize the Foundation series, okay? It's a trilogy, but then it's been extended by others. And the premise is that someone in this field of mathematics called psychohistory was able to predict eons of darkness because civilization was about to fall. And he predicted there would be many thousands of years before civilization would recover because he had the mathematics, that would actually show him this. So he set up something called the Foundation, which was a repository of all knowledge that would basically help bring civilization back from the Dark Ages once we recover from the darkness. Well, it turns out that was very well known. It was very out in the open. It was very science and technology focused. What people didn't realize was he had set up a second secret foundation. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to tell you what that was.
This is fictional, though, right?
This is fictional, yes.
So you relate to him how?
Because I think that if done well, collaborology, if we really understand it, can evolve a language. And that language can be expressed in mathematical terms, in symbolic terms. And right now, my working name for that is sociomatics. But I would love to evolve it to such a stage where we could actually be that precise with collaborology.
Can you just give us a little definition of what sociomatics is? Did I say it right? Sociomatics, you said?
Yeah, the mathematics of collaborology is what I'm calling it. So in other words, how do you look at collaboration dynamics, protocols, agreements, and express them in mathematical terms?
Do you have formulas that you're actually working on?
I'm trying to come up with them, yes.
Very interesting. What other questions? One of the questions on the list, I think this is an interesting one. Not sure if I like it or not. What animal do you most identify with and why?
I am a pig. All my life I've been a pig. Okay, I was born in the year of the pig.
Roll in the mud.
I love indulging myself. But yeah, if you read a bunch of things about the Asian zodiac or Asian horoscope of the pig, you know, I'm not superstitious to a large degree, but you know, I find it curious and fun to think about. Not to mention which, I do happen to get along with other pigs. And certain of the horoscope that I'm not supposed to get along with, I found individuals with those attributes that I've had very, very much difficulty with. So,
what's your sign? Wait a minute. What's your sign?
Well, there's two forms, right? I'm a pig. I'm also a Libra.
A Libra. Okay. So
I actually think I still have, if I'm not mistaken, Libra Pig is one of my internet domains.
Let's see if you get some hits on that.
I haven't put anything up there yet.
And I guess the last, well, actually, I should ask you, what is it you do in your professional life? I don't think I even know.
So it's actually been way longer than I would like to admit, but I started off in software. I then co-founded a company of my own with a friend of mine in California called DocuMagics. We did a product called Papermaster. It was basically the electronic file cabinet for PCs, and it actually did really well. You know, it bundled with Logitech and HP and Umax and Avision and all those scanner companies. I wish I still had that software. And then I went to Siebel Systems, actually by way of many other companies, but I ended up spending 7 years at Siebel Systems in enterprise software. And then right now, for over a decade now, I've been with eGain, where I started as VP of Engineering, then went to become a VP of Technology, and then was in product management for a while. And then now my current title is Technology Evangelist. And that really encompasses two responsibilities. One is I go around to various conferences and events and talk about our technologies in the context of enterprise contact centers, because that's our target market. But my second set of responsibilities, I deal with a very, very small number of very strategic customers and make sure they're happy. And so it's a difficult set of responsibilities, but I like it because I no longer have to run all of engineering, which had its challenges. I love that, you know, by the way. But I also like, you know, this new set of responsibilities that I have. So this part of evangelism, where I get to speak at various different events, that's one of the reasons I get to travel to some of these very interesting places. Well, I do also get to travel to the places where my customers are as well. So that also entails some travel. So yeah, that's in rough, very, very high level what I do in my day gig.
And where would you like to be 7 years from now?
I would actually like to have an institute for collaborology or collaborology research institute where we can actually be really understanding what makes teams scale successfully or what kills teams and what prevents them from scaling successfully. I'd also like to be building a thing called Global SIM, which is, you can think of it as a global brain, but it's a way for people to test their knowledge at any level and to create knowledge pieces that snap together to create bigger knowledge pieces and that are testable and executable and predictive, so that we can actually create decisions by modeling systems rather than just listening to loudmouths or listening to media and whoever has more money wins. So I'd actually like to reverse the decision-making process in societies where rather than very, very small numbers of people create two objectives and then billions of people vote, with about 15 seconds of attention on one or two such options. I'd like to completely switch that model where billions of people are co-creating what is best for us as society, so that voting is not really necessary, so that the best just bubbles up, because knowledge is executable, knowledge is testable, knowledge is predictive, and therefore we can actually create our own notions of what is applicable. By the way, that notion comes out of a character from another science fiction series. The character's name is Mentor. Mentor is actually a mental creature created from four separate individuals, but it's the universe's most evolved brain, and the game it plays is this game called visualization. And visualization is basically being able to predict what happens in the future. And the game it plays is how well can it do it. So Global Sim is one hack step towards that.
So I guess I'm going to leave you with this last question. Unless there's something you want to share, then please,
No, I got hours and hours. I mean, you probably know I did a deep dive myself in, what was it, July, August, September, sometime in that of last year. So I had 8 of these GCC weekends where I went deep into what I think and why I think it, including the influences in my life, like Doug Engelbart, my dad, Lao Tzu, others, Buddhism. And so there's many dozens of hours that I could go into, but I just want to focus on what you think is most.
Well, you shared with me that today you had a limited amount of time. That's what you shared before the recording.
Yeah, and I also know that people aren't going to watch really long sessions. So I think keeping it to something you're comfortable with at the level that you're asking, I think is perfect for now.
Well, I was going to ask
what this is. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
But this conversation is an invitation to whoever's watching that if any of this is interesting, let's get together. Let's explore further.
Yeah, and I'm actually thinking that we got whatever the purpose of this was for, that I think we have a lot of what we need. I mean, I hope so. But what the last question I asked.
This is from DocuMagics.
Oh man, do I wish you had that software.
Yeah.
But I was going to say to you, when you're meeting somebody, what is the one question that you're waiting to find out about them? Is there usually one thing that you really want to know about somebody when you meet them?
What do they care about? There's a saying which is trite, but I really think it's true, which is, before I care how much you know, I want to know how much you care.
I love that. That's very timely for me, because I've been listening to people try to convince me that, so-and-so, let's say, is a worthy person to spend time with. And they're telling me how smart this person is. Oh, but they're so brilliant. And I'm like, but they're not a nice person.
Yeah.
I like that. So before you say it one more time, before you tell me.
Before I care how much you know, I want to know how much you care.
Thank you. Well, I think I think we have what we need. And the good thing is, if we don't, we come back and do it again.
Thanks a whole lot, Stacy. It really, this is a lot of fun. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad it was fun. So in that way, I think I succeeded right there.
It's great. You make it fun, Stacy. Thank you.
Thank you.